My name is Maya, and I'm a 28-year-old nanny from a small town in India. Growing up, I thought my life would follow a predictable path: marriage, kids, and a household to manage. But I wanted more. 2 years ago, I landed a job with the Smiths, a wealthy family in New York, to care for their two kids, Ava and Ethan. The job was perfect, or so I thought. Karen, the mom, was warm and welcoming. Her husband Ryan seemed aloof at first, but polite. The kids loved me, and I enjoyed taking care of them. But now, sitting alone in my small room, I'm overwhelmed with guilt. I've been keeping a secret, one that eats away at me daily. I'm having an affair with Ryan. As I write these words, shame washes over me. Karen trusts me completely, praising me for my care and hard work. Yet, I've betrayed her in the worst way possible. It wasn't supposed to happen. I didn't come here looking for this. But Ryan has a way of making me feel understood, seen in a way no one else has. Now, I'm trapped in a web of passion and deceit. Every day, I tell myself to stop, to walk away. But losing him, even though he's not truly mine, is unbearable. This secret affair has become my greatest escape and deepest regret. How did it come to this? How did I, a simple girl from Ohio, end up hiding in the shadows of another woman's home? To understand, you have to know how it all started. When I stepped off the plane in the United States, the cold air slapped me in the face. The streets seemed to stretch on forever, and the sounds of car horns and chatter overwhelmed me. I'd never been away from home before, and the uncertainty was suffocating. The Smiths welcomed me to their grand house in New York. The mansion's white columns, perfectly manicured lawns, and sparkling windows left me breathless. Karen, a poised woman in her late 30s, greeted me warmly. Her kind words made me feel seen, if only for a moment. Ryan appeared, carrying their youngest, Ava, on his hip. His brief smile and firm handshake put me at ease. The kids, Ava and Ethan, were instant charms. Ava's curly blonde locks and mischievous grin won me over, while Ethan's quieter nature and love for books intrigued me. As I settled into my new routine, the days blurred together. I cared for the kids, cooked meals, and kept the house spotless. Karen's busy schedule often took her away from home, while Ryan worked from his second-floor office. Though he kept to himself, I sensed his presence. At first, Ryan seemed polite but distant, always lost in work or distracted by his phone. But as the weeks passed, I noticed subtle changes. His voice softened when speaking to me, and his glances lingered. He'd ask about my day, even when Karen was around. I brushed it off as kindness, but one evening, everything shifted. After putting the kids to bed, I cleaned up the kitchen. Ryan walked in, dressed casually, his dark hair slightly tousled. "You don't have to do all that," he said, nodding toward the dishes. I smiled, my hands trembling slightly. "It's part of my job," I replied. He leaned against the counter, his eyes on me. "You really don't have to do all this," he said softly. "Karen and I are lucky to have you." Something in his tone made me pause. I looked up, and for the first time I felt the weight of his gaze. It wasn't just polite attention, it was something more. I finished the dishes quickly and excused myself, retreating to my room. But that night, I couldn't shake off the memory of our encounter. The way his voice softened, the way his eyes lingered on mine. From that night on, things changed. Ryan seemed to find excuses to be around when I was alone. He'd ask for my opinion, linger in the kitchen, or offer to help with tasks. I tried to ignore the flutter in my chest, but it became harder each day. I told myself I was imagining things, but deep down, I knew the truth. Something was building between us, something that scared and excited me. The night everything changed was a quiet one. Karen had gone out for a charity dinner, dressed to impress. Ryan stayed home saying he needed to finish work. I was left to my routine, putting the kids to bed and tidying up. I hummed softly to myself as I folded laundry in the living room. The house was still, peaceful. I heard footsteps behind me and turned to see Ryan standing in the doorway. He wore a simple t-shirt and jeans, his hair slightly messy. "You're still working?" he asked softly. "It's just laundry," I replied, smiling briefly. Ryan sat down on the armrest of the couch. "You don't have to do it all," he said. "You already do so much for us." I kept folding clothes, trying to ignore the flutter inside me. "I don't mind," I said. Ryan watched me for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then, hesitantly, he said, "You're incredible with the kids. They adore you." A blush crept up my cheeks as I kept my focus on the clothes. "Thank you," I said softly. "They're wonderful children." Ryan's voice dropped slightly. "And you?" Ryan's words caught me off guard. "You've made our lives so much better," he said, his voice low and sincere. "I don't know how we managed before you came." Our eyes met, and for a moment, time froze. The air was charged with an unspoken tension. "Ryan," I started. But before I could finish, he leaned in and kissed me. It was a kiss that spoke of longing and suppressed emotions. For a split second, I hesitated, my mind screaming at me to stop. But then, something inside me gave in. I kissed him back, my hands trembling. The laundry slipped from my lap. Forgotten? As Ryan pulled me closer. His hands were warm and steady on my waist. When we finally broke apart, breathless, I couldn't meet his gaze. Guilt washed over me like a wave. "We can't do this," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "I know," Ryan replied, but his eyes told a different story. That night I lay awake, replaying the kiss in my mind. I told myself it was a mistake, but deep down, I knew the truth. Something had shifted between us, something I couldn't ignore. The next day I avoided Ryan as much as possible, but every time our eyes met, I felt the same undeniable connection. It wasn't long before we crossed the line again. This time it was in the kitchen. Ryan came up behind me, his presence sending shivers down my spine. "Maya," he whispered, his voice barely audible. I turned to face him, and before I could say anything, he cupped my face in his hands and kissed me. It was slower, deeper, and more sensual than before. From that point on, there was no going back. Our affair began in earnest, filled with stolen moments and whispered secrets. We would meet in the early hours of the morning or during the brief times when the house was empty. Each time felt more dangerous than the last, but I couldn't bring myself to stop. Ryan made me feel alive, making me forget the loneliness I'd carried for so long. But the guilt lingered, a constant reminder of our secret. As much as I tried to ignore it, the weight of our secret bore down on me. Yet I couldn't bring myself to walk away. Living a double life was exhilarating and exhausting. By day, I was the dutiful nanny, caring for Ava and Ethan. By night, I became someone else, caught in a whirlwind of forbidden passion. Ryan and I mastered the art of hiding our affair. We avoided eye contact when Karen was around, kept our conversations brief, and stole moments whenever we could. One afternoon, while Karen was at yoga, Ryan and I found ourselves alone. I was organizing toys in the playroom when he walked in, shutting the door quietly behind him. "You've been avoiding me," he said, his voice low and teasing. I replied quickly, though we both knew it wasn't true. He stepped closer, his intense gaze making my heart race. "Maya, you don't have to feel guilty every time you look at me." I looked away, my hands fumbling with blocks. "Karen doesn't deserve this." He countered softly, "What about what I deserve?" His words tightened my chest with guilt and longing. Before I could respond, he tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, his fingers brushing my skin. Maya, you're the best thing that's happened to me in a long time. Moments like these made it impossible for me to walk away. When he looked at me like that, I felt like I was the only person who mattered. But reality was never far away. Every time I saw Karen laughing with her children or thanking me, the guilt hit me like a wave. I questioned everything, my choices, feelings, and worth. How could I betray someone who had shown me kindness? Yet, I couldn't stop. Our secret moments grew more frequent and daring. One night after the children were asleep, Ryan and I sat together in his office, the door locked. He poured us wine, and we sat in silence before he spoke. Do you ever regret this? I hesitated, swirling the wine. Every day, but that doesn't mean I want it to end. He reached for my hand, his fingers threading through mine. Neither do I. The weight of his words stayed with me. As much as I wanted to believe what we had was real, I couldn't shake the feeling that it was only a matter of time before everything came crashing down. The guilt was a constant shadow. No matter how much Ryan reassured me, I couldn't silence the voice reminding me of my betrayal. Karen's kindness made it worse. She often thanked me, telling me how lucky they were to have me. Her trust felt like a knife twisting deeper with every moment I spent with her husband. One afternoon, Karen and I sat in the living room while the children napped. She smiled warmly at me. Maya, you've been a blessing to this family. I don't know how we managed before you came. Her words hit me like a blow. I forced a smile, mumbling a thank you, but inside, I felt like I was crumbling. How could I face Karen, knowing what I was doing behind her back? That evening, I avoided Ryan's attempts to talk, staying in my room longer than usual. I stared at the ceiling, replaying Karen's words. Was it worth it? Was the passion and connection I felt with Ryan worth betraying a woman who treated me like family? But when Ryan knocked on my door later that night, my resolve melted away. He stood there, serious, and without a word stepped into the room and closed the door. I know you're upset, he said, sitting on the edge of my bed. It's not right, I blurted, my voice trembling. What we're doing? It's wrong, Ryan. Karen doesn't deserve this. The kids don't deserve this. He reached for my hand, his touch sending a familiar warmth through me. I know it's complicated, Maya, but this, us, it feels right to me. His words soothed my guilt, but added to the turmoil inside me. I wanted to believe him, to believe what we had was more than just a fleeting affair. But the weight of our actions was becoming too much. In the days that followed, I threw myself into my work, trying to create distance between us. I avoided being alone with Ryan, ignored his texts, and kept our interactions brief. But it was like trying to hold back the tide. No matter how much I resisted, I couldn't escape the pull he had on me. One evening, I sat in the children's playroom, watching Ava and Ethan build a tower with blocks. The laughter filled the room, pure and untainted by adult life. For a moment, I envied them, their innocence, their freedom from guilt and regret. Ava looked up at me with big brown eyes and said, Maya, will you stay with us forever? Her words tightened my chest. I forced a smile and said, I'll be here for as long as you need me. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. I couldn't keep living this double life. Something had to change. Chapter 6, The Turning Point. Everything came to a head one evening when Karen came home earlier than expected. I'd spent the day avoiding Ryan, but he cornered me in the kitchen after the children had gone to bed. I need to talk to you, he said, his voice serious. Ryan, not now, I whispered, glancing nervously toward the hallway. Maya, he said, stepping closer, his hand brushing mine. We can't keep doing this halfway. I dot. The sound of the front door opening cut me off. My heart leapt into my throat as Karen's voice called out, I'm home. Ryan froze, his hand still on mine, and for a moment, neither of us moved. Then, as if waking from a dream, he stepped back, his expression unreadable. I quickly turned to the sink, pretending to wash a dish as Karen walked into the kitchen. Hey, she said cheerfully, setting her purse on the counter. You're both still up? Just finishing up some work? Ryan said smoothly, his voice steady. As I reflected on the close call with Karen, I realized the risks we were taking were no longer worth it. The guilt had become suffocating. The next day, I avoided Ryan, using the children's needs as an excuse. But he found me again that evening. We can't keep doing this, I said, my voice firm but shaking. Ryan's expression turned somber. Maya, I know you're scared, but we can't just walk away from this. It's not just fear, I countered. It's the betrayal, Ryan. Karen trusts me, and the kids adore me. I won't keep hurting them like this. Ryan sat beside me, his eyes searching for answers. Do you think I don't feel guilty? I do, every day. But what I feel for you is real, Maya. I looked away, the tears welling up. It doesn't matter how we feel. We're causing pain to those who don't deserve it. For a moment, Ryan's mask slipped, revealing a glimmer of vulnerability. Maya, I don't know how to let you go, he whispered. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. Maybe it's time we figured out how. The days that followed were a blur of avoidance and guilt. I threw myself into caring for Ava and Ethan, trying to escape the weight of our secret. But the truth caught up with me when Karen asked me to sit with her one evening. Maya, you've been quieter lately, she said, concern etched on her face. Is everything okay? I hesitated, torn between confessing and protecting our secret. I've just been a little tired, I said finally, forcing a smile. Karen's eyes narrowed, but she let it drop. That night I made a decision. I couldn't keep living this lie. The next morning I wrote a resignation letter, citing a need to care for my aging parents in India. As I handed the letter to Karen, her face fell. Maya, are you sure? She asked, her voice trembling. I nodded, trying to appear resolute. Ryan's reaction was more subdued, but I saw the pain in his eyes. Is this really what you want? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I stood firm, trying to convince myself as much as him. It's what I need, Ryan. As I left the Smiths' home for the last time, I felt a mix of relief and sorrow. I wondered if Karen would ever suspect the truth, if Ryan would move on, or if Ava and Ethan would remember me. But most of all, I wondered if I'd ever forgive myself for the secrets I kept, the trust I betrayed, and the life I left behind.